Hey, I wanted to hop on here and share a bit of the process of us working with Molson last summer. For context, I'm a creative director, and basically my role is to work with brands to understand what they're trying to create or what their goals are, and then pulling in the right creatives to execute on those ideas for those goals. When a client comes to me with an opportunity, I usually break it down into a 6-stage process. And that starts with figuring out the scope of the project, and then you can build a brief from that, pitch a creative idea, iterate on that idea, execute on that idea, and then implement that idea and distribute it. So after a client reaches out to you, I normally hop on a call or send over a list of questions to figure out kind of the scope of the project. The whole goal with the scope is to ask all of the questions up front to figure out what is needed to get this project done and what's needed to make it successful in the client's eyes. And those questions can look something like this, where we go over things like timing, deliverables, budgets, and anything else that the client really cares about. After the scoping call, you have an idea of what the client is looking for. And from that, if the client already didn't provide you with a brief, you can create a brief from the scoping call. A brief is the backbone of any project, and it's super important to align on the brief with the client up front so that expectations are met. So like I said, if the brief wasn't already created by the client, you can turn your scoping call into a brief and present that back to the client and have them kind of virtually sign off on this is the structure of the project. This not only builds confidence with the client, but everyone is on the same page, literally, with the brief, and we can move forward to the next step. Now that brings us to the next phase, the idea phase. This is when a creative director or a lead strategist puts together a few ideas in a deck and tries to visually tell that story of what the content and assets are going to look like. This is a critical stage to give the client confidence in your direction. All of this should ladder back up to the brief and hit those key messaging points that the client outlined. I typically present 2 or 3 ideas that are fairly different in nature, just so that we can nail the direction of the creative right off the bat. I think this is a super underrated point. I normally try to make these briefs very pretty and very aesthetically pleasing, as if they were like a piece of art themselves, because it'll give the client a lot more direction on the mood, look, and feel of the project, as well as it's easier to digest for them. This is when you can use apps like Photoshop or FrameSet to really capture the look and feel of what you're going for. Okay, jumping into the first concept that we pitched, this one was kind of to tie into the Oasis vibe that Visi already had in market. So tying in that Oasis vibe, we came up with the idea of, having these trees and plants gently blowing in the wind, presented by the image on the left here, while, waves are slowly rolling into the beach and clouds softly floating by, while having the product be in the center and having this frame of a jungle around it. For this, we knew we could customize each location with the brand's elements. For instance, we had Simply with lemons, but still have that overall, frame theme throughout the creative. Like I said before, I like presenting ideas that are different from each other just so we can go in one direction or the other. Concept number 2 was slam packed. For this one, we had the cans exploding with the elements that they individually represented. For instance, Simply Lemonade with lemon, or Visi with strawberries. Ultimately, we fell into concept number 1 because we felt that it hadn't been done before in market and it was more of an original idea. From the high-level ideation stage, we now can go into the feedback or iteration stage where the client will have feedback and you have to incorporate that into the idea. This is when we do what's called a pitchback, a 2.0 on the idea, and really fine-tune what the creative is going to look like. After the high-level idea was approved of having these 4 brands interact within the same frame, we then had to decide how they would interact visually together. We put together a deck to outline one idea that was time of day. For this, we'd use the time of day to motivate the background. Given there were 4 different brands, we could start with sunrise, day, sunset, and night. In the deck, we outlined a couple visuals to show the client what this would look like. Approach number 2 is a branded background. Now, this would be more unique to each brand as there are different elements for each brand that they wanted to secure. This would make the background environment connect with each brand theme. Vizzy is tropical, Arizona is mountain vibes, etc., while keeping the frame of the image the same. What I always like to include at the end of a pitch back deck is a work back schedule, because this can really tie in the next stages of the project and again set the expectations of when these stages are going to occur and when they can expect the assets to be delivered for market. Next, we have the execution stage, which is the coolest part of the project, for me at least, where we get to see and build the creative that was sold. For this project with Molson, we used a combination of After Effects and 3D software to create the three-dimensional images that were in the final creative. As a creative director, it's important to have a network of talent who are very, very, very good at their niche. In this case, I knew my buddy Jake was the right guy for this project. He's worked with beverage brands in the past, and he creates really compelling and unique 3D content. One of the challenges we had with this project was there were 4 different name brands: Topo Chico, Vizzy, Arizona, and Simply Lemonade, and they all had their own defining brand features, but within the creative, the client knew it was important to have an overarching theme while still bringing out those elements that make those brands unique. So for us, the overarching theme was this environmental theme where these drinks would interact with the environment, the frames would stay similar, but the flavors would pop on the border of the frame. And finally, the last phase of the project, the distribution phase. This is when we export the assets based on where they're going to live. This project was very unique because the creative would be living on a fridge that displayed an LCD screen in bars. The challenge here was we had 4 different brands, but not every single bar had all of those brands. For instance, one would just have Vizzy and one would just have Topo Chico. So in this case, we had to make 16 different variations for the 16 different possibilities of the 4 different brands. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching this. This is my first time doing one of these. I want to do more of these kind of breakdown videos to show the creative process because it's a lot of fun. If you got any questions about the project, please put them in the comments and I'll answer them.